We wanted to create a fun, non-judgmental space where women can talk about their shared experiences.
Here, we will normalize the challenges we face as females living in a society that dictates unrealistic and outdated expectations on what a woman should be.
Together, we hope to cultivate a supportive community of women who empower one another to courageously live unapologetically.
A quick disclaimer before we get started. Although Cindy and Danielle are licensed therapists, this podcast is not to be interpreted as therapy or a replacement of therapeutic services. It is strictly a conversation between two women about their experiences in the world. If you liked today's episode, please make sure to like and subscribe below. Also, follow us on all of our social media platforms at Unapologetically Females. With that being said, we hope you enjoy this episode.
Welcome back for another episode. Today, we are talking about youth mental health in athletics. Did that sound right, guys? That was like a mouthful. Okay.
Yes.
So, but we have a special guest with us today. It's you. If you know her, you call her Kathy. And if you don't know her, you call her Catherine.
That's fair. Yes.
I thought you were going to say, if you don't know her, you call her Kathy.
That's how I know. I'm like, when we first met, I was like, okay, wait, do you prefer Kathy or Catherine? Because I am so confused because it's like half and half. And you're like, if you know me.
It's like my test.
Yeah.
If you know me, you call me Kathy.
Yes.
Yeah. But
Well,
my signature at work says Catherine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's so formal.
You got to progress.
Yes. I'm so grateful that I'm in a space to call you Kathy.
You progressed pretty quickly.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
It's
Thank
so
you guys for having
exciting.
me.
Thank you for being here.
So, first, I just kind of want to learn about you and your experience in youth sports. You're also a licensed therapist as well, so that element also has probably just complicated things for you.
A little bit.
Or given you great insight.
Yeah.
So tell us about yourself. Tell us about as far as youth athletics and then also your educational background.
Yeah, absolutely. How far are we going here?
You get to decide.
Preschool.
Okay, let's go back to Canada.
That's right.
I'm Canadian. I was born in Canada. Yes, and I did gymnastics like my whole life in Canada. I got serious pretty quickly when I was about 6 years old. I think I started competing and just loved it and wanted to train as many hours as I could in the gym. So, you work your way up pretty quickly when you're that age and you show any sort of talent and your coaches believe in you. You just kind of start climbing those levels. So that was my life for my whole childhood until my family decided to move to Arizona for my dad's job, which I was around 12 years old at that time. And when I moved here, gymnastics was just like a whole different ball game here. It was very different than it was in Canada. It was the end of the 90s and early 2000s, and it was just extremely like serious and no jokes, and everyone was there to like do a job and be obedient with their coach. And I kind of just like burnt out immediately once I moved here.
Sad.
Yeah, it was. And so that's when I did a slow transition over to competitive cheer and did that throughout high school, and then went back to coaching gymnastics and actually doing intramural gymnastics during undergrad. So kept kind of in the fields the whole time. But really my love was always for gymnastics rather than cheer.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
A lot of tumbling in gymnastics and cheer.
There is, yeah. And on cheer, a lot of the people that I did gymnastics with were kind of burning out at the same time. And so we had a whole team of prior gymnasts. We were really good. We won state. We went to nationals. So I would actually say I was probably at a higher level of cheer at the national level and on all-star teams than I was in gymnastics. But like gymnastics was my love.
Wow.
Yeah.
So as a 12-year-old moving here and going like, what is happening, in this sport that I loved and, or love, and now it's like, it takes on a different form. Like, how did that impact you mentally, emotionally? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously really, really tough. I think, I moved here and I was actually really excited to move here because at the time there were a bunch of elite gyms in Arizona. I knew it was an amazing training environment. I'd never really been in an environment where there were so many high-level gymnasts and so many high-level gyms to choose from. So I moved here and I actually tried out a whole bunch of different gyms and kind of was finding at each gym, oh my gosh, like this is so serious. It's different. Like even skills had different names. The hours training were longer. So yeah, it did really impact me. And I think I kind of made the split decision when I was, coming home from a practice one day and it was rough. And I think I was probably crying to my mom and I just went, I don't want to do this anymore. And my mom being like, very accepting and loving was like, okay. And I think, thinking back a lot of my life, I always kind of went, why did my mom just let me quit? Like, why did my mom not say, are you sure? Try it for another week, try it for another month. Because I do think I probably would have continued at least for maybe a year or who knows. But if I had kind of stuck to it a little more, but not blaming my mom. I love my mom. She's fantastic and wonderful and supportive. But yeah, it was like a regret for a long time, just like quitting like that and deciding to move on.
Yeah.
Do you think that your mom, as a mom, maybe saw all the pressure that you were under and the unhappiness and the loss of love for the sport, and that's why she was so quick to say?
I think my mom, like a lot of moms probably, just didn't want to see her child unhappy.
Yeah,
so
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
She saw an unhappy child and wanted to make me happy.
Yeah,
And if that
I was trying
the
to look at it through her
decision.
lens, and I could see.
Yeah.
She probably was so willing to be like, okay, as long as you're happy and smiling.
Yeah, no, I think it was more of just, want my kid to be happy. We just moved to a new country.
Right.
Things were different in every capacity. I was in the middle of junior high at the end of it, and they don't even have junior high in Canada or where I was from in BC.
Wow,
so that was a whole new experience, new people, about to start high school here. So yeah, I think there was a lot of transition, and she probably thought it would be easier for me to do that. And then I started cheering too, which is very similar, especially all-star cheer. But that was a whole new thing to my family too, because in Canada at the time, cheerleading competitively as a sport did not really exist.
Right.
It was more, even like cheerleading as sideline, just kind of, there to support the team didn't really exist there. So to my parents, who my mom's like a feminist and very staunchly, anti-misogyny, she was like, what is this? What are you doing? So yeah, so that was a different thing for her too. And it like made me have to kind of find my way in my own path, because I obviously take after her and, have my own young ideas about feminism, going into what I felt like it was a sport, and the things that I wanted to do within the cheer world were related to tumbling and stunts. But there was this other part of it we still had to do, where we had to like dress up in the football players' outfits that were sweaty and disgusting for homecoming, and go out there and like make them banners and like put snacks out for them. And that part I struggled with a lot during high school. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you go straight from gymnastics into cheer? Mm-hmm. How did you come to that conclusion?
I had just the girls that I did gymnastics with when I first moved here. A bunch of them, as we were going into high school, were quitting gym and going into cheer.
Okay.
And it seemed easier and more fun.
Yeah.
So.
Is it true that if by the time you get to high school, you probably aren't going to go to college, then you go do cheer?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I remember being 11 and going, I'm not an elite yet. I'm not going to do anything in gymnastics. Like I'm not going to do anything in the sport.
At 11.
Yes,
Yeah,
I remember exactly at 11 when I was, before we moved to Arizona, going like, I better get to Arizona and get serious about this, because otherwise I'm not gonna be able to get a college scholarship.
Wow, you're just a baby.
Yes.
Like you're so young. That's, I think, so what I see now, and I'm sure it's been going on for a long time, but now I just have kids, so I am in it, and the pressures and the investment that people, that parents put into their children and on their children in their sport at such a young age. And it's like children are being treated as these like little elite athletes or elite athletes in training at such a young age that it's not it feels like the fun, just like, let's just go out and play youth sports, you know, is no longer there. It's all about the scholarship and what school am I going to get into, and like private one-on-one lessons. And it just seems like a lot, right? And a lot of pressure mentally to put on such a young brain, you know? So did you experience any of that? Like, I mean, at 11 to go, I'm not going to do, like, that was the foresight you had to go, well, I suck. Like, I'm not, that just seems heavy to internalize. Like, how did you navigate that?
I will say it was all intrinsic. Like, it was definitely not my parents' pressure. It was me looking around and, you know, going, oh, I used to be the youngest and I was the best in this level, and now I'm older and I'm not the best anymore. Yeah, I think I internalized it as, obviously, like, I'm not good enough for this. I need to go find something that I am good at. Cheer looks like it might be that avenue right now.
Yeah.
So I did it, even though I didn't really love it the whole time. But I was like, I know I can be good at this. I know I could get a college scholarship in this. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cindy, your kids were in cheer, right?
My youngest was a competitive cheerleader from started in gymnastics, and then they recruited her to do cheer. Yeah, and she did it from like 5 until 18.
Okay, All-Star or school? Yeah.
Both.
Okay,
All-Star,
both.
started in All-Star, then dropped out of All-Star. Around middle school, had a block, you know, which is something I'd love to ask you about. Not just because of her, because I've seen patients with it too. Yeah. And then went back for a little while, and then went on to do high school cheer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so I know that world a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I traveled with her and did all of that.
Yeah, no, I'm sure you know a lot.
Those coaches are very influential. And it's like a little family, you know, when you're on that team. It was great for her that way. What was hard as a parent, and I think as like 9 and 10-year-old, in cheer, they choose the smallest flyers, right? And I'm trying to explain it to people that are listening and to Danielle, but they choose the smallest flyers. Sometimes that means they're 10 years old, but they're on teams with like 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And so they're hanging out with 16, 17, 18-year-olds. And so that is very hard to navigate what you're hearing as a 9 and 10-year-old, and then as a parent who wants to see your child succeeding in what they love to do, but then is also being just being included with a much older age group that potentially could be not a great influence.
Totally. Yeah. So your daughter was one of the really good young ones
when she was young. And then, like you said,
ones.
you know, then she was really good when she was young. She still was really, really good. And people started catching up to her, you know, and then bodies change. And that's one of the things that's really hard about ballet and gymnastics and cheer is go through puberty, bodies change, things change. It's rough.
Now that you say that, that is interesting because, you know, in gymnastics, you're definitely body conscious as a child. Like, I remember thinking I was so fat when I was like 7 or 6, comparing myself to other kids. But cheer makes it so known to everyone because they pick a flyer and they have bases, and it's always the flyer's the smallest, the bases are the biggest, the back spot is tall. So
Exactly. It's really about size.
And then you have flyers who get too big and they can't fly anymore, and they're very cognizant of that, right? Like, I can't fly anymore. I'm too big
or
now.
my daughter was always a flyer, but she was always very cognizant, had to be of her weight, and her coaches. There's no. You know, coming from an eating disorder background, that was really disturbing to me because I was like, I get it. I get that, you know, lifting someone like that is hard. And how do you parent that, you know?
Yeah, that's
in
true.
a healthy manner.
Yeah.
As you're saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, like how cutthroat. And being a young girl already, just, I'm sure, like, you're just aware of your body, right? Like, just in general. Then you throw that layer into it of like your spot on the team is really dictated on your body.
Yep. And the whole team knows that.
And
it's a team sport. So gymnastics not really a team sport.
Right.
Often it's intrinsically driven, and you're just focused on yourself. But it's a full team
Oh my
sport.
gosh.
Yeah. So your team's depending on your weight sometimes.
sometimes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that is intense.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure to put on a young mind.
Yeah.
You know, as you develop, and like, what does that do to your, just even your internal dialogue, your view of what I should look like or what women look like at this. It's just so, that's heavy. That is very heavy. Did you experience anything? I know you were saying like you yourself were already identified, like I'm heavy. That's just crazy. As a 7-year-old,
Yeah.
like, that's wild.
Yeah.
But as you continue to grow up, how did that impact you and your view of yourself, your body image, all of those things?
Oh, duh, your whole life. You can't be 7, thinking that and not have it affect you as an adult for sure. Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I have this like very clear vision of after a competition getting in my parents' minivan and looking at my thighs and going, oh my God, my thighs are so big and this is why I can't tumble. And I was probably 7. Like, that's why I say 7. Just remembering like looking at my bike shorts, like going, oh my God. And yeah, that hits throughout life. And I think, and I don't know about your daughter's experience too. I'd love to hear it. But I started high school and I was 4'11". Like I was pretty small and I was like a stocky spark plug, which was great for gymnastics and for tumbling. But it also meant I was a base often for the older girls. So I'm throwing around the 17-year-olds.
Oh my gosh.
And I was actually 13 when I started high school because I skipped kindergarten, no big deal.
Genius.
Just saying.
But yeah, I remember like basing senior girls who were like, maybe even the same height as me, but I was just like, a strong individual. So yeah, throughout high school, like I think it was my goal to lose weight more and more and more so that maybe I could fly, just kind of in the back of my head. I don't think I ever like.
Is that like a coveted spot on the team, a flyer? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially center flyer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because the ones that aren't as strong flyers will go towards the back of the formation.
In case they
and
fall.
then
It is like,
Oh, it's cutthroat.
Yeah.
it is cutthroat.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How, what was your experience with coaches?
Good and bad, I don't always listen to this, but in high school, our main coach was one of the girls' moms. And this girl was the only other freshman with me on varsity. We had done gymnastics together prior, and we were just kind of like paired up throughout our whole cheerleading careers because we were, the good freshmen who were on varsity, who did all-star together, who did gymnastics before. And me and her mom definitely butted heads.
You and the mom did.
Yes.
Okay.
Just because I did feel like the whole time there was favoritism towards her daughter, which like makes sense, right? But there would be special privileges where she would like let her daughter go home from a basketball game on a weekday night because she had homework and she was feeling stressed out and
Nobody else could.
nobody else could. Yes. So just instances like that for years, like by senior year, me and that coach were
On the outs.
not copacetic. But yeah, and I think you definitely have the gamut of coaches. I know you see that with your daughter, and you see that too. You have ones that are fantastic, and ones that
Ones that'll scar you for life.
ones that'll scar you for life. Those ones that focus on weight, or those ones that we've talked about before, like riding the line between emotional abuse and strict coaching, who you feel like was a strict coach when you were young, and looking back now, you're like, whew, like, yeah.
What types of things within the work that you do, what types of things do you commonly see within athletes and the different, layers that they're facing and how that's impacting their mental health? Like what's out there right now that's happening?
I mean, in my work, I do work with this helpline, but I, just in the athletes that I talk to in general, kind of making relationships across the board. Really, it's the emotional abuse piece I hear about is the, especially people who are adults and they look back on things, kind of like what we're talking about right now, how I was treated as a child, whether that's like performance-based or weight-based or, you know, supporting your teammates, just pressures to reach a scholarship level, outside forces and even intrinsic forces, causing mental health, you know, concerns later on, I think is something that I'm seeing in adults now. And maybe that's just because I interact with adults more, obviously.
Sure.
But people really looking back now at their careers and going, oh, like that definitely affected me in this way or that way. Or, you know, I see now this correlation in my adult life with what's going on and what occurred within my sport specifically in my childhood.
Yeah. I was talking to someone recently, high school senior, and he was sharing how his baseball coach was speaking to the team. And I was floored. And I'm like, do you know that that's not okay? Like that is abusive. And he was taken aback. I mean, also he's a kid. So he's a senior in high school. So I'm, you know, I step in and I'm like, do you hear what you're saying? Like, let me walk you through this. So I know, you know, it may be a bit intimidating. But it was just so demeaning the way that the coach was speaking to the team. And he said, yeah, there had been concerns that were raised, but like no one ever wants to push anything because they don't want their playing time to get cut. And so then I told him, I'm like, well, if you want something done, tell me, because I'll get involved, you know.
That's so Danielle of you. It's a great quality though.
But he was like, no, don't, like, there was literal fear in him of like, and I was like, what's your coach's name? And he didn't even want to tell me. He eventually did because I got it out of him. But it was, I just felt so bad because this was, you know, he loves this sport and is in fear of not being able to play it if he does speak up. And I'm like, do your parents know about this? Like, and the parents do. Like, they do know. So it's even that piece of like educating parents on being involved and advocating for your kid and not standing, like taking that shit, really. Like, no, you don't get to treat these kids that way. I mean, and there's a difference between coaching and like teaching discipline, and like strong work ethic and all of those things, and then being abusive, you know? And I think that we have somehow in some way accepted that crossing that line, or the line is just blurred. I don't know. And I don't know how to change that. It's like, you know, being able to educate people on healthy sport, where, you know, like, what does it look like to engage with an athlete from a coaching perspective? Especially a youth, like, let's also start there. Understanding brain development, understanding that you're in a position of power, understanding that these kids are holding on and internalizing every word you say
for the rest of their lives sometimes.
Exactly. And so I think that like that's a huge piece that is missing within the youth sport world right now, is educating coaches and parents on their power and influence on these young children and how to interact healthy with them. And also the pressures that parents put on their own children too. Again, like, it's youth sport. They're in little league. They're in whatever, you know, whatever the sport is, you know, allow them to have fun, and you don't, like, even the parents arguing with one another. Like, it's like, guys, you know, we're not at, you know, the championship, you know what I mean? Or like on this world stage, you know, it's just a fun game for these kids, and it becomes so toxic because the parents allow it and engage in it. And so I think that that's, you know, those are conversations that need to start happening more and not be tolerated. And really, it all comes down to just keeping the athlete and their well-being at the forefront of our minds versus winning the game, or versus having the best athlete, or versus getting the college scholarship, or making the big leagues, or making the NBA, you know what I mean? Whatever the sport may be, because it's like this, you're ruining so much time with them. You know what I mean? Like, you have such a limited amount of time with your kids. And then they go off, and it's like, you really have to keep that in perspective of like, if this is what we're feeding them for 10 years or 8, 12 years
not
of
if
their
they're
life.
moving back home to the basement. Just saying, you might get them back. Let's not push them out.
Is that what's happening here?
I don't know. I'm not judging anyone, because it could be me, and that's okay. I'll accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Love
But
it.
it is, just remembering though that these kids are kids, and like what you're putting and feeding into their minds now could potentially impact them for the rest of their lives. And so like, calm down, really.
Yeah.
Right.
I think there's still that attitude though that, you'll become stronger because of it, right? Like I endured this when I was an athlete and I was successful, and, it made me a stronger person. It taught me discipline. It taught me structure. So now you're going to endure that too and become a better person because you've had this, experience that beat you down to like build you back up.
That's one of the hardest things I think that I hear when I'm counseling parents and teens is parents saying, well, when I grew up, I did it this way. Or when I grew up, we can't do that anymore because our kids have so much information at their fingertips now. And social media has changed the world. And so when we lost a soccer game in high school, it wasn't posted everywhere. And it wasn't, I wasn't highlighted as the person that missed the winning goal, and it wasn't sent all over the world and all over the school. And, the pressure to do well now is so much bigger. And also I think they use social media as a tool as well. They promote it with social media. They highlight kids on social media. So then kids want to push even harder to be the highlighted athlete of the week, or, so I agree, though a lot of us that are parents now grew up as we're also athletes. It's just so much different. We can't.
Yeah.
So much
No, that's a good point. You can't get away from it.
Can't.
It is true, though, and that's something I don't think about because I don't have kids, is that you can't get away from it. You're not going home and having dinner and talking to your parents about your day and doing your schoolwork. You now have a screen in front of you that can remind you of all of it.
Your schoolwork's on the screen, so it's popping up while you're doing your schoolwork. It's just everywhere.
Well, and even the pressures now too to try and get into a university, a scholarship, and because now it's like they're celebrities, like they're mini celebrities to some degree. They're getting paid, there's large contracts and sponsorships involved, and I think that has added another layer to the pressure that kids are put under. One, and then two, when they're in it, the pressure that they're trying to navigate that system of all of the pressure and the social media attention and the media in general. And then these large sums of money that these kids are getting. And, I don't know what the statistics are with how many of those athletes convert over to professional athletes.
Low.
Very low.
So it's like, but that's another element is that you were in this fishbowl essentially and being praised and receiving these accolades and getting all these likes and comments and money and status, quote unquote status, and power, to some degree, or perceived power. And then it goes away when you're done, at 22, 23.
Now
and it's
who
like,
am I?
what?
Now who am I?
Yeah, now who am I?
Like,
Exactly.
I was my sport. Now who am I?
Have you seen the documentary on LSU on name, image, and likeness? There's like a mini series on LSU because I think they're one of the biggest schools in terms of making money off NIL and profiting off NIL, which you're familiar. So they followed all these different athletes, and some of them were like Livy Dunn and Angel Reese, who are some of the top earning NIL athletes. And then they followed like a track athlete and a lesser known football player who were really trying to get NIL deals, but they weren't known. And just not only the pressure of succeeding in your sport, the track athlete was trying to make like a world team, not just her college her college spots, but she also was trying to build this influencer career. And so it's like this second layer that like exists where I want to succeed in my sport, but like also I really want to be an influencer. And that is a way you could continue a career after college, you know? And I think a lot of students, when they're competing in college, choose majors or choose classes that are quite easy for them, or maybe, you know, just easy to pass for anyone in general, so that they can have time to do their sport, which is understandable. There's so much happening within college athletics where you have to like do your athletics and practice and promote it and go to school, which is like becomes the bottom layer of it, but then you have no skills when you've been taking kind of bullshit classes, which not everyone does, you know, but it is something that happens. For the paycheck. So I'm just here to play my sport, which is, you know, which is understandable. Like,
so the influencer thing, like, that is a whole other layer. We just we did an episode today on self-esteem. And we were talking to intern Rita on.
Is she a Gen Z?
She is it
younger? Alpha?
22.
She's 22.
Is that Alpha?
I don't even know. Okay. Maybe Alpha?
Maybe the cusp.
Okay.
We'll
Zelfa?
Zelfa.
Yeah. Zelfa, if you will. She's that.
Okay.
And we were talking about, you know, like for her, she's had social media since she was 7, right? Isn't that what she said? 7.
Wow.
And comparing herself and all of the imagery that was constantly at her fingertips and looking at people and compare, you know, the comparison piece. And I think, you know, now with sports, it's that, you know, now it's that element, but then you add NIL and the money associated with it. And then it's like, now I can make a career. If my sport doesn't work out, I can make a career out of being an influencer. And a lot of that is based on people liking or accepting who you are, right? And if they don't, telling you as well and trashing you.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the impact and effects on your mental health and just living in that world too. And I'm sure that there are influencers that have figured out a balance, right? I'm not saying that it impacts everyone negatively, and, you know, good on you if you've been able to create a career out of that. But I just think, as I'm thinking about like the young brain of a student athlete, and how confusing that must be
100%.
to experience, to be in that experience, and then how your body is responding to it. It's like when you graduate, you don't continue on with your sport, but now you're still doing the social media thing, perhaps, and it's continuing to base your monetary value, your actual intrinsic
I know intrinsic keeps stopping me up today too.
Intrinsic value, you know, based off of external validation of others. And that's just, I think I said it and when we were recording another episode of like, it's just so dangerous. It's so dangerous.
It was reminding me too of like the kids whose parents have put in all this time and money and effort to make their kid the best at their sport, quote unquote. And there's that's so much pressure on the kid. Like now the family is also depending on the kid to make do for all of the time and money invested, right? And then the kid goes out to go try and make the team or do whatever. Maybe they don't make it, or maybe they do, and then maybe there's, you know, hopes of them becoming a professional athlete, and then so now you have this child who's lost their childhood because they've given it to this sport in order to be the hopeful for the family, to support their family. That's a lot.
Yeah, that's true. So for those families who it's a, you know, a monetary stretch to be able to even put their kiddo in a sport, and then that pressure of that kid, you know, trying to succeed because they feel like they have to actually support their family.
Right. Or at least succeed to the point where it was worth their mom working 2 jobs, right?
Or parentification.
Right.
Yes. 100%. So Tell us the solution. No. How do we
fix this?
running out of here.
We got 2 minutes. Tell us how to fix it.
Yeah, how do we fix this? How do we create a healthy sport for youth, and how do we change this? Have a shift in like awareness of the impact on these children.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that a lot just because, you know, like thinking about like the abuse world, like working in child welfare for a long time, sexual abuse and physical abuse are so easy to define.
Right.
And, you know, it's easy to understand why it's bad and how it can affect people. But like emotional abuse, psychological abuse has such a gray line, whether it's just in regular parenting or it's in coaching. You know, what is strict parenting or coaching? What is abusive? And so how do you fix that or go towards improving it if you can't even define it, right? So,
right. That's a good point. That's
What are the guidelines, right?
Yeah.
And that's, so I think maybe that's where you start. Kathy? No, I'm just but
I'm tired, Danielle.
ready to retire.
Yeah. We really have to work.
Yes.
40 years.
But I do think that's a good starting point, is identifying and educating people on the difference, you know?
And the coaches.
Educating
the coaches, educating the parents, you know, they're still kids.
Absolutely. Stay tuned for curriculum from Elite Mental Health. Shameless plug of our practice.
And you know, my favorite quote too is trauma is the experience, not the event.
Exactly. I love it.
Spreading that around to parents, to coaches.
Yeah.
So
and
true.
sit with that. Like that is such an impactful statement. Trauma is the experience, not the event.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that gives people a little food for thought as they coach, as they parent, as they support youth, you know, in sports today in general.
Well, and as you participate as a youth, it's
Right.
okay to play more than one sport. It's okay not to be the best at your sport. It's important to still love your sport. It's important to be playing it for you, not because other people think you should.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, those are all so good points. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for joining us
Thank
today.
you. Thank you for having
It's
me.
been
Thanks for
lovely.
coming.
As always, I'm Danielle.
And I'm Cindy. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.